We hope you enjoyed Matisse La Dance with Tracy. And as Tracy announced, we will be commissioning a new work from American composer Kimo Williams for our season opening program this September. We are honored to have Kimo joining us live this evening for our broadcast. Hey, Kimo, how are you
Hello.
doing?
Hey, I am doing great. Thank you. I'm doing
How are you
great.
doing, and from where are you joining us?
I'm in West Virginia. I moved here from Chicago in 2015. I'm on the banks of the Potomac River, I'm on a cliff overlooking the Potomac River, and I'm inspired to write music every day. So this is great.
Cool. Well, we're so happy to be commissioning from you. Could you talk a little bit about, have you been composing during the stay-at-home and pandemic, and have you felt inspired by anything in particular, other than our
Well, Matt,
piece?
yeah, well, I think mainly it's been your piece, but I've also got to, being at home all the time, you're constantly now thinking of more opportunities to write. So where you used to have to set a time aside and say, I need to set some time aside to write. Now I'm actually, the time is coming to me and it's saying, write, 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 write. So other than your piece, I'm writing a new country western song about how we all need to come together, and it's called My Country. I'm really getting into my photography and taking more pictures along the Potomac River here in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And I'm just relaxing with my wife, and every once in a while I get to talk to my daughter on the phone.
And Kimo, I think something that's very unique about you is that you are a Vietnam veteran. You spent a little time in Vietnam, but you took your guitar and you played instead of shooting a gun, or I think you
I think I did both.
things creative. So can you talk a little bit about your background, and then what motivated you to become a composer?
Oh, wow. Yes. Well, 1969, I grew up in Hawaii, and from high school, I went to a concert and I saw Jimi Hendrix for the very first time. Saw him live, and this was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. And I said, wow, what he can do with a guitar to speak to the people and to the audience like he did that night, that is, was just amazing. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to use music as a way to express myself, as a way to talk to people. So the very next day, I actually joined the Army and was sent to Vietnam. I had actually thought I was going to join and not go to Vietnam because I joined instead of got drafted. However, first place I went was Vietnam. And while I was there, I was a combat engineer. And as a combat engineer, my job was to go out into the field, and we were clearing land so that the infantry would come in. Every once in a while, we could come back from the field and we would have what they call R&R, rest and recuperation. And during that time, we'd go to a little service club, and you can pick up a guitar and you can kind of let all the bugs out and just kind of play your guitar and relax. One day, somebody heard me playing and said, we need some soldiers to go out and play for the troops on the front lines, but you need to take your M16 and take your guitar. So I had an opportunity while I was in Vietnam to put a band together, and then I would tour Vietnam also for 30 days, and I would go out to the front lines and actually play some music for the Marines out there in Da Nang and Hue and places like that. And one of the things I got from that was the sense of really how powerful music is in a way to help people to have a sense of home. So that was very special to me, and ever since then, I look at music as a way to express myself, but at the same time to communicate with the people around me. So that was in 1969. I came back in 1970 and used a GI Bill. I went to Berklee College of Music, did that for 4 years. Then I taught there for 2 years, and then I moved. Then I met my wife, who was a saxophone player, a very good saxophone player. Well, she wasn't that good at that time, but she got very, very good. And then we got together and decided to move to Chicago, where she grew up. And I moved to Chicago and was teaching at Columbia College in Chicago. And I could go on and on, but that kind of gives you an idea.
Thank you, Kimo. Well, we can discuss a little bit more about our upcoming commission project in a few moments, but first let's hear our 2018 performance of your Into the Liquid String Quartet. Could you please set this up for our viewers?
Yes. I think it was about in 2012, the Ethel Quartet out of New York contacted me, and they were already playing a piece of mine called Quiet Shadows. And they asked me if I would be interested in writing a piece in reference to Doc America in the 1970s. I think it was the EPA commissioned photographers to go around the country and take pictures about the world that we live in. And then talking with Ralph Ferris, part of the Ethel, they wanted us as a composer to use these images to find inspiration to come up with a piece. As I looked at the images, one of the things that really struck me, and the images that really struck me, were all had water attached to them. And as I looked at the water and the images, I started to think about my life. And when I look at my life, I realized that in a lot of specifics of where I've been, because I've been to in a lot of places. My dad was in the Air Force, so we did a lot of traveling. So I realized that water was significant as it relates to who I am as a person, from being in New York, going to Coney Island, to going to Hawaii, the Pacific Ocean, and in Vietnam, I can't even remember, Cameron Bay, and the Black Sea, and down in Louisiana when I was down there with my dad, and the Gulf of Mexico. So all of this water sort of inspired me to see if I could connect my music to the essence of the water. And then at the last movement of this piece, I try to invoke the importance of understanding veterans, because as a veteran, most of my music, I like to connect to that experience of my life. So Into the Liquid came from that inspiration, and I hope you all enjoy that. every time I hear that is awesome, guys.
Thank you so much, Kimo. We had such a
Yeah.
great time
Yeah,
working on
Thank you.
that piece.
wow.
And it's so beautiful, and I think what you talked about in terms of your connectedness to bodies of water, I think we
Yeah,
all can relate to that in some way. So,
yeah. Have to
well,
catch my breath.
let's continue here, and maybe Kimo, briefly, you could talk about the our new commission with you. I believe the working title is "With Malice Toward None," and yeah, why
Right.
don't you explain a little bit more about your thinking and creativity behind this?
Well, first off, I want to thank you and Apollo for even offering me the opportunity to write. And when you get a commission, you want to say something, but you want to say something more than the technique of composition. You want to say something about yourself, about the world you live in, about the people around you, and you want to have a message. You know, it's not always it's supposed to be a message about, you know, let's be good people or bad people, but you want to communicate something. And when you suggested that it's in reference to the 250th, I believe it is, anniversary of the death of Beethoven.
Birth.
I'm not sure. The birth,
I
right?
think it's
So,
yeah, birth. So, yeah.
right. So of course, before I start a composition, especially if it's a commission, I like to know my subject. I was commissioned by the West Point Academy to write a piece for the bicentennial, and so I researched West Point, and I found through that research that the Buffalo Soldiers they ended their regiment in West Point. So I wrote a piece called Buffalo Soldiers, because that is what inspired me, and I wanted to connect to West Point in that way. So when you mentioned Beethoven, I wanted to do a little bit of research on Beethoven, not so much about his technique of writing, but who was he, and how did he look at composition, and the kinds of things that his life had gone through. And when I did the research, one of the things that really struck me, that I felt a real kindred spirit with Beethoven, is his sense of humanity. He wants everybody to get along. And as erratic as he was, and I'm not a historian where I know his history that well, but from what I did gather from it, a lot of the things that he did it with the understanding that he wanted people to live as citizens in this universe, as opposed to the conflicts that we seem to that seems to come at us. So when I thought of that, I also thought about a image of a picture that I took in Washington, D.C. back in 1980 of the Lincoln Memorial. And this image that I took, which I didn't know it at the time, but there was an individual who was sweeping the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And it was just such a juxtaposition of the Lincoln Memorial and this person who was sweeping, that I said, you know, here we have this great man being Lincoln, and this individual who was sweeping was you know, a minority. And there was this juxtaposition of, we all need to work together because we're all about one. And so I looked at Beethoven from that same perspective, that he wanted us through his music. And I think that's why when Napoleon declared himself emperor, that sort of threw him for a loop, and he kind of scratched his name off the score and renamed it. And when I saw how much that impacted him, I wanted to make sure that as I expressed myself as a composer, that I would write something that meant as much to me about us coming together as a community of citizens, that somehow the score could do that. And this is why I named it With Malice Toward None, which is the name of the image, which is available at my website, kimopix.com.
And thank you, Kim. I also want to mention that you do a lot of outreach with veterans groups. We've started to do outreach with veterans groups the last couple of years here in Houston. And I don't know if you want to talk just briefly about your work in that capacity.
Yes, in 1998, I went back to Vietnam, and I've gone back about 6 or 7 times. Each time I've gone back, I had conversations about the culture of American music, and I did lectures, and I was a Fulbright specialist at the time. And every time I went back, there was a new understanding of the importance of us as Americans reconnecting to the Vietnamese from a cultural perspective. So I started a program to create cultural relationships between Vietnam and the United States. In 2000 and I think it was about 2003, I was with the USO, and I was with a band called the Lieutenant Dan Band, and we were doing USO shows around the country. And at one point we stopped, and a Marine came up to me who came out of, he lost both his legs in Afghanistan. And he said he wished he could get back and had a guitar to play. And I said, is there any way I can help? He said, well, if you can get me a guitar. So at that time, my wife and I, Carol, decided that we would start a program that would provide art resources to VA medical centers around the country. So the United States Veterans Arts Program started in 2003, and we just finished and met our mission as of last year, because at this point in time now, the VA understands the importance of medical issues that are not always connected to a limb, but also connected to PTSD and things like that. And art therapy, music therapy is a huge, huge area that they now incorporate into their main mission. So that was our program, yeah. Sorry.
I'd love to direct people to your website and more of what you do, your composition, your photography, and your veterans outreach.
Yes.
We need to continue with the program, but what we wanted to do with this commission is do something that was a little bit different in terms of celebrating this anniversary of Beethoven, this historic classical composition figure. And I think we're well on that way to do that.
This will be different.
Yeah, it definitely will be different. Thank you so much for being with us, Kimo. Have a wonderful evening. Yeah. Have a wonderful evening, Kimo. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and thank all you guys. Love you. See ya.
Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye.